Hey, good afternoon. I'm Bill Hamblett from the Naval Institute. It's great to see such a great showing of people here for the West Panel Engagement Theater. This afternoon's topic is how can DoD leverage artificial intelligence to win our nation's wars? And I have the pleasure of introducing the moderator of the panel, retired Navy Captain George Galdarisi. George is a career naval aviator and an award-winning best-selling author. He began his writing career in 1978, I'm proud to say, by writing a proceedings article, Naval Institute Proceedings. He's the Director of Strategic Assessments and Technical Futures at Naval Information Warfare Center Pacific here in San Diego. George has written about 15 books, including a reboot of the best-selling Tom Clancy Ops Center series, including 3 consecutive New York Times bestsellers. And his latest project, co-authored with Captain Sam Tangretti, is a Naval Institute Press book titled Algorithms of Armageddon, The Impact of Artificial Intelligence on Future Wars. So without further ado, George, the panel's yours.
Thanks, Bill. Mike, okay, can y'all hear me in the back? Okay, good to go. So, Bill, thanks for that very kind introduction. As Bill said, I work at Naval Pacific, and we have a lot of visitors, and our CO usually gives the overview brief, how many people work there, how many PhDs, et cetera, and he asked me to give the technical vision brief. And when he introduces me, he says, now you're going to hear from a knuckle-dragging naval aviator on a closely supervised work release program. So, Bill, that's a big step up. On behalf of the panel, I'd like to thank the Naval Institute and AFCEA for giving us a chance to share our views, and a special shout out to Amy Starkey, who puts these panels together and makes it seamless. I mean, we feel well looked after, and the fact that you all are here is we owe it all to Amy. So what do we intend to do over the next hour? I know you have it on your apps, but this is the high concept for the panel. Big data, artificial intelligence, and machine learning are changing the world today and will change it more in the future. And today there's a need for an informed dialogue on AI in general, and especially when AI is applied to military weapon systems. So the intent of this panel is to strip away the hype about AI and give you the facts on the ground as our subject matter experts know it, and then to open the floor to you all for questions. So we have assembled a panel of subject matter experts. You have their bios in your West app, but very briefly, we have from my left, Colonel Randy Pugh, who's the director of the Naval Warfare Studies Institute, the Naval Postgraduate School. Dr. Katie Rainey, director of Science and Technology for Intelligence, Surveillance, and Reconnaissance for the Naval Information Warfare Center Pacific, and Dr. Sam Tangretti, who's the LIDOS chair for Future Warfare Studies at the Naval War College, and I co-author on the book that Bill was kind enough to mention. So please join me in welcoming our panelists. So we have a ConOps or a flight plan or a voyage thing or I guess an operational order for Colonel Pugh. Each panelist will speak for a few minutes just explaining who they are, what their organization does in this field. And then I'll ask each panelist one additional question, and they'll have an opportunity to answer that, and then they'll ask each other questions, and then we'll turn it over to you. So the question in advance that I sent to all the panelists was this: from your perspective, what are the opportunities and challenges associated with the U.S. military leveraging AI technologies to ensure that our warfighters can prevail on tomorrow's AI-enabled battlefield? So in addition to the info in their bios, we've dug out a fun fact about each panelist. Since we'll start with Colonel Pugh, a fun fact about Colonel Pugh is that he attended the Naval Academy in Annapolis, and he's also from Annapolis, Maryland, and from his room austere room in Bancroft Hall, he could actually see his home. So near but so far. So over to you, Colonel Pugh, for your opening remarks.
Great. Thanks, George. Appreciate it, and thank you all for coming today to listen to this panel and specifically to my thoughts on this subject. So I was talking to Katie as we were walking over here today. Like, did we do this last year? Maybe the year before? And if we did, what was it? And it was 2 years ago, and I think the subject was also artificial intelligence. There were like 7 people here or whatever in the audience. But what a crazy year it has been. So if you're familiar with the concept of the AI winter, that is where there's all this hype about AI, huge investment, huge enthusiasm, followed by an injection of reality about how difficult it is or how immature the technology really was and how far it was to being realized. And that then leads to the chopping of all of the resources and despair and cynicism about the technology. So we had 2 AI winters to this point, back in maybe early this year, late last year. Thought we might have, or I'm sorry, late last year or earlier last year, thought this might be another AI winter, but it seems like ChatGPT, large language models, and generative AI may be an AI spring, that we may not be going to suffer through another AI winter. And so hopefully my colleagues will talk about some of the exciting possibilities in the area of AI, just rattling off a couple. So chatbots and digital assistants, which everyone is now using from elementary school kids to at the TSSCI level by the intelligence community. Computer vision, autonomous systems, predictive analytics, and decision support tools. Generative AI has led to new ideas about how to use AI and use that technology specifically, but also a general resurgence in enthusiasm for other kinds of AI or other methods. So my comments, and they're going to be very specific to where I am now at the Naval Postgraduate School, and that is like all inventions of the past, whether that was radio or radar or nuclear power or space-based capabilities. The technology itself is interesting, but is not a capability within itself, and that requires a lot of other things in order to give it utility as a military capability. And so I was here for the Don CIO conference yesterday. John Boyd was, quote, and as a Marine, everyone for some reason loves the Air Force fighter pilot. So John Boyd talked about people, ideas, and things in that order. And then also the Naval Warfare Studies Institute is named after Captain Wayne P. Hughes Jr., who wrote Fleet Tactics. And so my comments are going to be about Sailors Matter Most. And if you want to know tactics, know technology. So, so the first one is about Sailors Matter Most, or people. And so how will the DoD realize the nascent capability or the latent capability that is AI? And I think the first and most important investment that we need is investing in our people. And that is certainly relationships with industry and taking advantage of all the really clever people that are in research universities and doing things as IRAD or as commercial technologies that have the potential for dual use. But most importantly is investing in ourselves, and that is rolling our own, to look to our sailors and our Marines specifically and figure out how do we take this incredibly talented workforce, these incredibly talented men and women, and invest in them and create a workforce that can both understand AI, come up with new creative applications for AI for warfighting purposes, and then advance the technology once we figured out the utility for what we have at the moment. So if you haven't seen the Chief Digital and AI Officer's Workforce Development Strategy, it's very good. And what it looks at is a role-based way of developing an AI workforce. So there's lead AI, appropriate for very senior leaders. There's acquire AI. There's integrate AI. There's develop AI. And so depending on where you are in the enterprise, there is an appropriate level of education and training and understanding about AI that will help you do your job better, more efficiently, and to leverage these new technologies for the purpose, for which your organization and for what your job was created. But what we don't have right now within the Navy and Marine Corps is a specific element of our workforce focused on AI. So certainly AI applies to surface warfare, or Navy Special Warfare or the Marine Corps. But what we need is similar to cyber or similar to SIGINT or electronic warfare, is a workforce that's focused on AI. And then the second maybe big idea or the point goes to ideas, and that is similar to the workforce. We need to treat AI as a warfighting function. And I make that equivalent back to electronic warfare and to cyber. And so the other thing I would say is in order to realize the potential of AI, we need to embrace the idea of algorithmic warfare. And that is the three elements similar to electronic warfare of attack, exploitation, and protection. And then to develop the concepts, the warfighting concepts, and how we would apply those things both to protect ourselves from things like poison data, from the manipulation of models, as well as to exploit the adversary's use of AI and to attack their AI-enabled systems. So thanks. I think that was longer than you wanted, George. Sorry, I got carried away. But I think as we approach AI and we think about how are we going to take advantage of this, it would be people, ideas, and things in that order. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Colonel Pugh.
Is there any time for anyone else?
You're good.
All right,
You're
go
good.
ahead.
So next up is Dr. Katie Rainey, and a fun fact about Dr. Rainey is that even with her responsibilities at NIWC Pacific and running the naval applications of machine learning workshop every year, she still finds time for a more refreshing leadership experience and is a Girl Scout leader with a troop of 7 daisies and brownies. So Dr. Rainey, over to you.
So he's using the same fun fact from 2 years ago, and I now have about 15 brownies and juniors who are in 3rd and 4th grade. If you need any Girl Scout cookies, let me know. I have many. So I'm glad that Colonel Pugh started with a nice optimistic view of the AI spring, because I tend to be somewhat cynical about AI, actually. I actually was giving a brief this morning and someone mentioned LLMs and I rolled my eyes and sighed audibly, and I feel a little bad. I hope I didn't offend him. But, you know, there's all sorts of hype about AI, and I see my role as a government researcher at a warfare center at NIWC Pacific to sort of bring everyone back to reality a little bit. And maybe sometimes I go too far with my cynicism, but I think it's important to talk about how hard the problems are that we have to solve. Because if we can't be realistic about the challenges, then we're never going to be able to solve them. And that's really where I see the role of the warfare centers, like NIWC Pacific, and there's 14 other warfare centers, Navy warfare centers across the country, as well as lots of federally funded research and development centers, UARCs, and anyone else really doing R&D to support the DoD. I see our role as sort of bridging a gap between the academic community that are trying to understand first principles of AI and developing algorithms and methods and techniques, and the operational community that needs to have the technology down the road. And for the DoD, we have so many specific types of challenges that aren't being thought of out in the rest of the world. And it's our job to first recognize them and describe them and then find solutions for them. Probably 2 years ago, I don't remember what I said. I probably said that the big challenge was trust or evaluating our algorithms to make sure that they work properly in the scenarios that we need them to work in our difficult operating environments. And I still think that is sort of the paramount challenge facing the development of AI technology right now. But recently I've been thinking about another one, which is sort of becoming a buzzword, but ML ops. And the more I think about it, the more I see that just sort of being everything. And what is ML ops? It's really the logistics of getting data and models from one place to another. And just like regular logistics, the rest of the world, they made a truck and they can go drive a truck from one place to another and they've got a road and everything's going to work fine. But the Navy has more difficult logistical challenges than that. They might not have paved roads. They might not be able to safely drive from one place to another. We might not have the internet to get data from one place to another. We might not have GPS to know where we are from one time to another. And we might not have platforms that have the amount of compute that we're used to. So solving the logistical challenges for AI is really, I think, the next frontier for our research and development community. So I challenge you all to think about how you can support that. And then lastly, Colonel Pugh talked about people and how we support people. That's also very important to me in supporting our Navy research and development community. So to that end, I run a workshop on naval applications of machine learning, which is really meant to showcase the great work happening in the research community across the Navy and the DoD, and along with all of our partner organizations. We're partnered with FCA San Diego, and we have an event coming up March 11 to 14. I have some flyers up here. Although if you have ever talked to me before, you probably know all about it anyway. And so that's what I've got.
Okay. Thank you,
Thank
Katie.
you.
Okay, finally, Dr. Sam Tangredi. Dr. Tangredi is a writer, and a fun fact about him in the realm of writing is an author once made him a character in an adventure novel, but unfortunately killed him in the second chapter. So there's probably a cautionary tale there, Sam. So over to you.
Thank you, George. I'm going to go right to the challenges and opportunities for industry, because I know most of you folks are industry and you want to know how can we compete in this AI competition for AI businesses. There are three ways that I see it that the big AI developers are not doing enough of. The first is deception. AI doesn't seem like it's prone to deception because it's all about big data. And when you talk to AI developers or CEOs of major AI companies, they say it can't be deceived because we can tell what the anomalies are in this big data. In fact, the one claimed, we've determined that sumo wrestling matches in Japan were fixed by seeing the anomalies. But that's not what the military faces. In the wartime situation, you're going to have the big data first, but as conflict goes on, you'll have less data. And their solution to deception was all you need is more data. Well, you're not going to have more data. The deception piece is that has to be worked on is how does the AI system recognize it is being deceived? And the way I think about it, deception is, I watched the previous panel that was talking about cloud and generative AI. I was thinking, what happens to the large language model when someone suddenly adds made up words to it, inserts it in? Can it still function? What does it write? What does it develop? You know, if you use ChatGPT, you often find that early versions gave the wrong citation stuff. But since it's soaking up data from the internet, it gets the conspiracy theories too, and applies that to whatever the subject is. So AI can be deceived, and the approach that bigger companies are using is we just need big data, more big data. If you're deceived, you don't have enough data. Well, in a wartime situation, you're going to have less data because your sensors are going to be degraded, and you need to develop a system to know when the enemy is spoofing you. Now, that leads to the second challenge is how do you develop an AI system that can operate with incomplete data? And that is the question. If data is degraded, that is, it's less and less data, is there a certain point that the system really is not producing a useful answer? It's not producing a useful, it's no longer a useful tool. And that's another area I think that industry, if you're small business, whatever you all focus on, is what I would call, AI that can handle reduced data, that AI that can handle incomplete data and still give a product. I'm thinking about predictive AI in particular. The third piece is about auditing the trail of the AI development, which is all about trust and that. My concern is that a lot of the AI that we're trying to apply, coming from open source, is being written by people and places that are potential opponents. And I don't know if anybody's tracking that out and saying where can this be influenced? A colleague of mine talks about how the original computing languages like Fortran and Lisp was developed for AI, were very difficult languages, and they needed exact input. But by doing that, they were much more difficult for anybody to hack into. Now, the modern languages are easier because we want that ease of use in a common setting, open source architecture, but they're much easier to penetrate. So what my concern is, how do you audit the AI model? How does a company look at it and say, yes, we can assure you that the developers of that all the way to the source code did not include something in it? So those are the three areas that if you work in, I think those are the three areas to work in, very similar to what Katie was talking about. Those three. How do you handle deception? How can the system operate and produce as a useful tool if the information is being degraded? It has less and less information to use. And then finally, how do you audit the trail of where this program was developed, and not just who developed the final product, but where did it start and where did the programming actually begin? Those are three. And the application of AI to military things, particularly in decision making, is very difficult. We can use AI with predictive maintenance and a number of functions, but we're also going to have to use it with autonomous systems, and also in improving decision making, as they talk about speeding up the OODA loop. John Boyd, you mentioned John Boyd, and that is a challenge that I don't think is really understood. There is a book that came out by three professors at the University of Toronto's Business School, and recently came out. It was published by Harvard. It's called Power and Prediction: Disruptive Economics of Artificial Intelligence. It has 3 paragraphs in there in the entire book about military use of artificial intelligence. And this is what they say. At first, the military might seem an ideal place to apply AI tools. As military theorist Karl von Clausewitz wrote in the 19th century, war is the realm of uncertainty. However, if AI becomes good at optimizing the solution for a given problem, then an intelligent enemy has incentives to change the problem. And they conclude, the enemy will go beyond the AI training set, and peacetime data will be of no use. And that's their view, and I think there's a great deal of truth in that. So the challenge for you all is how to design systems that can handle deception, because that's what the enemy is going to be doing. It's going to be giving you false data and trying to spoof the data in any way it can. As I said, large language model, suddenly someone adds made-up words, thousands of made-up words to it. Can it still perform its function? I don't know. But that brings us to the second point, which is can it still operate in a degraded condition? Does it know it's being deceived? Can it give you the product that you want? And then, as I said, finally, auditing, where is this model coming from? Who is doing this model? There are companies, even some who might be out there, that have done development at universities in the People's Republic of China. I think that is a big problem. There's one company here that still shares data, facial recognition data, with China. I would not like that if I were a Uyghur in the minority group that is being sent to the re-education camps based on AI.
Thank you, Sam. Okay,
So
you
okay.
good? You need a few more words, or you good?
No,
You
that's
good?
it, George. I
Okay.
came to my end.
So I had one specific question for each panelist. So going back to Colonel Pugh, you've been director both in uniform and now as a civilian. And this morning the CNO mentioned that it's not just about technology, it's about technology teaming with people. So how's the Naval Postgraduate School preparing our future leaders to deal with technology as AI emerges?
Great. So NPS is this magical place in Monterey, California, that brings together 1,500 resident mid-career officers, 200 international officers from our nearest partners and allies, early career engineers that work at the warfare centers, getting their master's degree and PhDs. And I don't know if I like this quote or not, but training is for certainty, education is for uncertainty, when you have this argument about whether it's education or training. And I think the uncertainty of disruptive emerging technologies makes NPS the perfect place to explore kind of what it is and what it is not, and what it can do and cannot do. And in that same line, so the officers and enlisted service members and civilians that are at NPS are learning to do two things with these disruptive emerging technologies. We're teaching them to innovate, and that is think about, project forward, think about the future. Where is this technology today? What is the environment like today? What is a potential adversary capable of today? And then how can we design new concepts or new capabilities to leverage this disruptive emerging technology that will give us advantage, in some future contest? And so that's, I think, very important, because you bring together the operational experience and savviness of the mid-career officers. That's then combined with the deep technical expertise of the PhD faculty to really come up with some clever, creative, and achievable results. But maybe more importantly, I think, is this idea of adaptation, that we will not be able to skate to where the puck is going to be. We've never been able to do that. And really the advantage for the United States military especially is being thrown into situations where your prediction was wrong, and being able to quickly understand what's happening to you, why it's happening, understand the foundational science, technology, engineering, and concepts, and then be able to creatively come up with new ways to gain competitive advantage. And so the officers and enlisted service members and civilians that are at NPS are learning to be innovators, but also, for some unpredictable future state, able to adapt and overcome the circumstances that are presented to them where they find themselves not in a position of advantage. And then my last kind of 2 points on this, the other byproduct of this is, and especially for industry, is you get a smart customer. You get a customer who's able to express a requirement or an operational need to you that's not do some of that AI stuff or whatever. And a smart customer, in my opinion, is always a better customer, because they can discriminate between what's real and what's PowerPoint deep. And if your company is building a real product, that's the kind of customer that you want, that will dismiss the people that are just selling something on that's paper deep. And then the last benefit of this whole thing is talent spotting. That by bringing these 1,500 together, there's some people that ended up being supply officers or surface warfare officers or information warfare officers or pilots. Who knew when you were 22 years old that was your calling? But maybe by exposing you in the middle of your career to this thing called AI, we are going to find people who have exquisite talent in this AI thing and be able to then pull them out and talent manage them separately. Maybe still for that community, doing AI for aviation or doing AI for surface warfare or undersea warfare, but certainly being able to identify them and to manage that talent, exquisite talent, manage it exquisitely. So come to NPS, be a student or work with NPS. If you're an industry partner, we would love to have you as help figure this out. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you, Colonel Pugh. So for Dr. Rainey, in your role with stewardship for the last 8 years of the Naval Applications and Machine Learning Workshop, you bring together hundreds of academic, military, industry people. So how do you synthesize, and particularly for the industry partners here, how do you synthesize such diverse work into something that can bring things to the warfighter?
So NAML is very research focused. It's very technical. We have a lot of research talks that go, into a lot of technical details. Some of them are higher level, so there's sort of, kind of all levels there. But its primary focus is to share the technical work that people are doing and get feedback on it. So my favorite sort of success of NAML over the years, I think, is in the field of radio frequency machine learning, which has really become a strength at NIWC Pacific. And it's a great example of an application space where private industry and academia didn't necessarily have a lot of interest in and need to go and do research on RF data, because there's plenty of apps to be made with images and not so many to be made with RF. But of course, at the warfare centers and at other DoD organizations, we knew that there are these problems out there, and we started working in this space. Now, I can't take credit for all of the great research that happened at NIWC Pacific and elsewhere, but I can take credit for giving them a platform for coming together once a year and sharing tutorials in this area, sharing their emerging research, sharing their successes and their challenges, so that the entire community could be exposed to why is this important, what's hard about it, what are the gaps, what do we need to do next, and what is the warfare area where this can really be applied. And we've had, maybe not our first year, but I keep meaning to go back and check, for a number of years we've always had a session on RF machine learning. And we have some of the same players. It's not a large community, but it's growing, and there have been some really fantastic successes in the last year or two, and some maturing of the technology. So I think that's a great example of how coming together and seeing what everyone else is doing, getting out of your office, and exposing yourself to new ideas can help mature technology faster. That's really how science works. That's why academics love going to conferences every summer. And sometimes the government folks think that we aren't supposed to go to conferences, but sometimes we get told that explicitly. That's why we don't call it a conference. We're a workshop. So if you're interested in RF machine learning, we've got another great session coming up in March, and lots of other technology areas you can tell a similar story about. So I think that's really an example of why this sort of thing is important.
Okay, thanks, Katie. So last question before we turn it over to the audience for Sam. If the scientists and engineers like Dr. Rainey find ways to insert AI into our systems, sensors, platforms, and weapons, and if Colonel Pugh and the Naval Postgraduate School and other institutions help make our warfighters AI smart, is that going to change the character of warfare, or what big changes do you see coming down the pike?
The issue is, of course, comes from Clausewitz about the nature of warfare and the character of warfare. And nature of warfare being violence, organized violence, usually between states, and the character being what tactics are used to fight that war. I think in the future what's going to happen is we're going to have more and more autonomous systems. And right now, the various uncrewed, unmanned platforms, think of something like the UAV Predator, is controlled by humans. It's flown as if it were a plane, except the pilot's sitting outside in an Air Force base in Las Vegas. And same with the Navy's Triton, which is the anti-submarine UAV. It's flown out of someone in a building in Jacksonville, Florida. It may take off from Guam, but these are controlled. But in a coming conflict with a technological near peer, what's going to happen is there's not going to be the communications to control this. So my view, and maybe it's a frightened view or a pessimistic view, is that more and more the character is going to be changed by the use of autonomous systems, not without people in the loop, but people on the loop. Right now the policy of DoD is none of the uncrewed system, unmanned systems can use lethal force without a human deciding. I think that will not work well in the future when the enemy can jam our communications, can knock down our satellites, can attack our networks. The systems are going to have to be operated under mission control. They've got a mission, you send them out, and they conduct that mission. But as far as the use of force, they're going to be using force. They're going to decide when to use force based on their mission profile. Now, people tend to get upset about that, but in reality, we've used weapons like that all along. Think of sea mines. The Captor mine in the Cold War was a mine that fired a torpedo. It was designed to be able to sense the hull of the ships, the submarines that were passing it. I mean, to the point of knowing what the ship was by name and character, and then it would decide what its target was and what to fire at based on its program. That is, human did not make the decision. The human made the decision where to place the mine. So these autonomous systems are going to be making the decision, and the challenge is, how do we cling to the idea that there has to be a human in the loop pressing the button if we're going to use lethal force? And guess what? Our potential opponents are already building systems that can use lethal force without humans. So I think that's going to be the issue as far as the character of war.
Okay, thank you, Sam. Okay, now that you've heard from our panelists, we wanted to open the floor to you all. Please step up to the mic right up here at the front and identify yourself and your organization and ask whatever question you have. You can address the question to one panelist or the panel in general. In that case, we'll toss a coin and see who wants to answer it. And as a courtesy to others, just ask a one-part question, and I'm sure all our panelists would rather field questions than listen to a manifesto. So who's got the first question?
Sir, Neil Zerby with Aerospace and Defense Industry Partners. First of all, I just want to let folks know that George and his family got flooded out of their house a couple weeks ago during the storm. So he's living out of what's left of a suitcase, what's left of that. But great job on compartmentalizing my fellow naval aviator and carrying on with the panel like nothing ever happened.
Yeah, thanks, Cal.
My question is, in the discussions about inserting AI into our military systems, I'm curious what systems would most benefit from being AI enabled. And I work a lot in the unmanned systems and sensors domain, so I kind of think that's where it's going to have a lot of relevance, but I wanted to hear from you all on that.
Let me ask Dr. Randy to start with that, because we do our testing on various platforms at the lab. So where do you see the AI being inserted right now?
So certainly there's a lot of space in the unmanned systems, lots of ATR that is already sort of commercially ready that can be put in. This is where I think the MLOps piece is really what's missing here. The ATR algorithms exist. You can buy them for drones, right? You just pay more money and they can recognize kind of normal things on the ground. But when you're talking about specialized targets or learning from experience and then transferring those models to the rest of your fleet, that sort of those logistics are still very difficult. So I think that's maybe a step beyond where do you insert the AI. The other answer I was thinking of is as an analyst aid. So because when you have specialized Like for the RF case, for example, you don't have YOLO for RF. You don't have these open source models that you can borrow from that are super mature the way that you have in computer vision. So they may not work all the time exactly as you want, but they can give an analyst something, they might highlight something that they weren't expecting to see, that they didn't notice. And if they're wrong, then maybe they're a little annoying, but when they're right, they're going to be right. So I think especially as you don't have the trust piece and you don't have the perfection that you might want, having that human involved, but helping point out something I didn't find is really where you're going to see it. But it could be any system. And I think we can be creative about where you apply it and what types of data are coming off of your systems.
Yeah, I'd like to pile on to that, what Katie said about where we should insert AI, and I think Sam teed it up a little bit. Some years ago, the DoD unveiled something called the Third Offset Strategy, and it was really the brainchild of the Honorable Robert Work, who is now the Naval Institute chairman, and it envisioned man-machine teaming. And as in Sam's example, and there's many others, you have a P-8 aircraft that's supposed to team, according to the Third Offset Strategy, with a Triton UAV. And today, there is no teaming. And the reason there's no teaming is two separate manufacturers build those platforms, and no one has written an operational requirement to do that. So if you're a program manager, you don't do that because there's not a requirement. So I think it goes to you all in industry to say, well, it's kind of like Reese's Pieces. I've got chocolate and I got peanut butter, and if we bring these together, we can have AI-enabled platforms. And then the Triton becomes, the P-8 mission commander talks to the Triton just like you talk to Siri. And you say, stay on my wing for now, or go northwest, or do this or do that, and the Triton talks back as to what it's doing. That's not breaking the laws of physics. That's pretty basic technology. So I think that answers part of your question. And then the other thing is that where AI can get inserted, if you look at the Navy's Force 2025 or 2045, it's a hybrid fleet of 350 crewed vessels and 150 unmanned vessels or uncrewed vessels. So unmanned surface vehicles, I think, are the wave of the future and where most of the research should go, because those are the ones that are going to populate the fleet of 2045. But thanks for that question, Neil. So, who's next? Terry?
Hi, I'm Terry McKerney. I run a small ops research group called the Ranger Group. Wayne Hughes, by the way, Colonel, was my thesis advisor longer ago than we were going to admit. So you talked a lot about the concerns about the validity of data, the accuracy of data, the suitability of data for your training models and so forth. I have another concern, and that is my concern is the nature of the models themselves from a structural perspective. Specifically, we rely on mathematical technology, mathematical assumptions, very much based on normality and those sort of things. So I was telling Sam earlier today when I was in a session with the executive director of the Joint AI Center, which name has been changed now, but he said, neural networks don't know when they're wrong. Neither do people. Now, I'd question him on that. But he's right. And so much of our AI is very reliant on neural networks, for example, right now. There are other techniques that are developing and being built. How are we going to ensure that we're using the right underpinning models and mathematical assumptions to make sure they're applicable to these problems that we're talking about relative to reliance on AI?
Who wants to take that one? Katie. It's unanimous.
I mean, I could get
Go ahead.
pretty geeky on this one, actually. You want to talk about math? Okay. So let's see. So neural networks feel like a hammer, right? You can just throw any data in it, and it's going to churn through it and find some pattern and tell you the pattern it found. There are a lot of examples where that doesn't necessarily make sense. Before neural networks were the thing, we had these kind of more expert systems where you had experts deciding what were the right features to pull out of data and how to use those. And those work, when they work better than neural networks, and you don't want to throw out that sort of expert knowledge. And you see that a lot in cases where you're working with, say, acoustic data, right? And you've got Jonesy looking at the screen, and he knows exactly what to pull out from that. And when neural networks are applied to that sort of data, they're finding some random patterns, and they get 99% accuracy, but the operator has so much expert knowledge that it's very difficult to trust. So I think there's maybe two responses. One is that when you can use expert knowledge, you should. And maybe there's a combination of these things to be done, but don't throw out the expert knowledge just because you've got a neural network that you can throw data into. And number two, I think there's still a lot of work to be done with understanding what you're really learning from these features that neural networks are telling you to do. There are some kind of visualization capabilities and all sorts of technical things that you can do to see what do those features look like? Do they map to the sorts of classes that you expect to see? Do you even have the right data to test it with? There are a lot of sort of mathematical techniques for doing those things, and still a lot of research is warranted. And I think I would like to see more of that done on the type of operational problems that we need to be solving, not just on sort of the academic data sets. So that's a gap.
Yep. So I'll do a poor job of explaining what's in my mind, but so I think Katie comes at it from the production side or the solution development side, and I'm kind of thinking of it from the customer side. And I don't really care how it works or whatever it is, as long as it gives me the right answer. And so with a bunch of a black box where you have inputs that come out, and then you get an answer that comes out of the black box, and that may be correct or may be incorrect. New, amazing technologies like Omniverse, where you have basically virtualization of a small part of the world or the entire world, and so you can feed in synthetic data on the front end, like, hey, I have perfect knowledge of exactly what the battlefield looks like. Your sensor could see this at this level of resolution. I pump that in the black box, I get the answer back. Now let's go look at my perfect knowledge in the world and see if I got the right answer or not. And so it allows you to kind of make sure that you're getting a good enough answer out of the AI model or out of the AI system by first an Omniverse, complete virtualization of everything. But then maybe rolling in digital twins, so the thing in the virtual world is actually a real thing that's duplicated in the virtual sense. And then slowly, move out of that virtual sense until you put it into the real world. And then, of course, AI models continue to learn, and sometimes they learn the wrong lessons or something. And so you have to constantly go back and repeat that cycle to make sure that your AI model is not straying off and starts to give you, hallucinations or results that aren't what you would expect. Key to this whole thing is the operator to understand, hey, with that, that's what I expect to get out on the back end. So I think that should be exploited more, and I don't know that we're doing that yet.
Sam, you want to pile on some more?
Yes, you just heard that the operator is most important. That's so true. And thinking about Terry's comment that the systems can make mistakes, but the human does too. One of the problems with AI is the terminology that was used. For example, neural networks makes you think that we're talking about operation that's similar to the biochemical process in your brain. No, vastly different. What people don't realize is that when John McCarthy and this computer scientist got together in the 1950s for their first section, many of them opposed the word artificial intelligence to describe what they were doing because they said makes it seem like it's human, and it's not. The best definition of artificial intelligence, which is more like machine learning, perhaps, is it is statistical tools that teaches a computer, a machine, to make predictions based on past data. That's what it is. It's not a human making a decision. So if you think of AI that way, you recognize that the human has to definitely be the expert, and it relies on human, because this is statistical tools. That's what it is. It's not decision making. It doesn't even know it's making a decision. It's just giving you an output. So once you compare humans, machine, there's no comparison there. Now, there's 3 definitions that I like for AI, and whenever I have people talk about AI, I says, well, what's your definition? The first one is what everybody thinks, a machine that can replicate the decision-making and actions of a human, particularly with visual recognition and with language translation, and that's true. The second is what I told you about as far as the statistical tools. The third is a great one from a Navy lieutenant commander who worked with, and had a great one. He says, it's whatever we haven't done with computers before. So the human is got to be the dominant feature, particularly in anything handling military affairs, because that's not the natural place that AI has been utilized by the major corporations, and it's very specialized.
Thank you, Sam. Yes, sir.
Hi, my name is Dr. Ben Amaba. I'm with Sonatype, which is a cybersecurity firm. And I'd like to pull on the thread, Dr. Congretti, about open source software, because I think that is a big concern. If you actually looked at the vectors, especially in AI and PyPy, it's probably the most breached system out there, relying on vulnerability or even nefarious individuals. And AI, to me, in the winter, that could cause the spring is the use or reuse of open source software. But the use of open source software is actually creating vulnerabilities and nefarious people, right? That's the big target or the vector. Is NPS or any of the partnerships you're working with looking into that research, looking at the forensics, looking at the provenance that you measured? Because I believe your third point that you're pulling on actually drives your deception in the models and the data. And what we're also seeing, it's occurring farther down the supply chain through dependency diagrams, through typo squatting. But I think if you address number 3, we might be able to address number 1 and 2. Wanted your thoughts, and is NPS doing any partnerships with some of the leading AI universities looking into the forensics of that?
George, can I begin? To understand the penetrability of the programs and stuff and AI, you have to understand these were being developed in an era when we believed in globalization, where the world was going to be naturally a democracy, where wars, we were past history, when major wars weren't going to occur. And so there wasn't security in mind, because scientists thought we're sharing the knowledge. And in doing so, though, it allowed for many participants to understand how to hack into the system. But it was done because people weren't thinking of security. They weren't thinking of that at all. We are in a different era. We have a different era where there's authoritarian states trying to control this technology and trying to control us. I often say our fear, and I think George and I expressed this in the book, our fear is not AI replacing humans, like you've heard the big debate about that. It's humans using AI to control other humans. That's the threat, and how we deal with it, it's a big challenge.
Yeah, just on the question of Naval Postgraduate School. So there's trustworthy AI, and trustworthy AI is the moral and ethical aspects of human in the loop, on the loop, out of the loop, and relying on an AI system to make decisions, under supervision or not. But it's also the risk of a system, that you can't explain why it's making the decision. You can't reverse engineer the black box and, this is how it was trained, and this is how it, given this input, how it got that output. So I think the answer to your question is NPS looking at this. Yes, explainable AI and trustworthy AI in a general sense, yes. This question of dual use and open source software and models that have been provided pre-trained, I'm not sure that we have, or that we have anything in depth right now. You mentioned cooperation with other research universities. It's certainly that, Carnegie Mellon and MIT and others, but it's also cooperation with industry. So a lot of investment and a lot of research is happening, in the private sector, inside of IRAD in companies. And what I would appeal to you to is to do something like a cooperative research and development agreement with NPS, so that we can put the operators side by side with your scientists and engineers that are working in industry to get after this problem while preserving intellectual property and market advantage. Thanks.
Okay. Yes, sir. I think you have the honor of asking the last question.
Oh, terrific. Paul Rosbold from Systems Planning and Analysis. Years ago, and we didn't call this AI at the time, but I think it fits Dr. Tangretti's definition, we automated on submarines the target motion analysis problem. And we found that performance of the submarines in target motion analysis actually got worse. And the reason it got worse is because we had stopped training the sailors in the theory and practice of target motion analysis, and so they failed to recognize when the AI got it wrong. I think there's a danger there for us as a Navy that we may use this as a crutch and fail to train the sailors to recognize when you get it wrong. And some of you have hinted at that already this afternoon, but I'd like your thoughts explicitly on that. Is there a danger there that we fail to train, and how do you deal with that?
Yeah, if you don't mind, I'll take that. So the CNO mentioned that this morning. She said it's not just the technology, it's the sailors too. And to give you some examples that we think is a very positive thing, and the CNO talked about this in her remarks at the Reagan National Defense Forum in December. In Fifth Fleet, you have CTF 59 doing IMX exercises, Digital Horizon. They've been doing this for years, primarily with unmanned surface vehicles. And then the PAC Fleet led integrated battle problems that happened right here in San Diego, have been going on for years, again, primarily with unmanned surface vehicles. And then AW22, the Australian Defence Force exercise, or exercise in Europe. So the idea of putting these in the hands of sailors and Marines, the active duty force is making that happen. So I think we'll avoid that TMA issue that we all lived through, because we're letting them try it out, and guess what? They say this works okay, this one not so much. So the industry is getting that feedback from the sailors to evolve these platforms so they're more useful. So I think we're all optimistic about that, Paul. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Good afternoon, and thank you all for coming. On behalf of the U.S. Naval Institute and AFC International, I'd like to thank our speakers on the panel for taking the time to join us today and share their thoughts on this important and evolving topic.